Another thing I mentioned last week about the article, a lot of times it doesn't get translated. Like when I showed you the verse on Jesus wept, it's Ho Jesus, which is literally the Jesus, but we don't translate it the Jesus. They use the article with nouns all the time, even though we don't translate it. And I don't know if it's to help with them. I know it helps me. If you know the articles don't change. So when you know the article, when you see it, whatever case it's in, whether it's ho, to, or to, tone, this is the masculine singular. So when you see those, you'll know it's masculine, and then you'll know which case it is right away. So it just makes it easier to see the noun and to know what part of the sentence it should go in. So again, that's a future. Jeff will probably talk about that some next week. So there we have the three genders. As we learned last week, also, if y'all didn't fill it out on the first page, it's under noun declensions.
Sometimes that translation, when they leave the articles out, like the example you used, it's understood. I mean, it's understandable why they would leave it out. But
There's reasons to leave it out that you would even use it. I mean, just because it's not there doesn't mean there can't be a theme there.
Some of the translations, some of them where they leave out in the translation is problematic.
It could be, too. Especially if you have a specific way you want to translate it, then you can manipulate it to, in some cases, the way you want it to be.
The faith versus faith.
Yes, in some things. Likewise, that's with the. The Greeks have no indefinite article, so there's nothing that translates to our a or and. So usually the absence of an article would mean that it's a apostle or an apostle versus the apostle or something like that. So, or generally hologos is the word. If you just saw logos, it'd probably be a word in general. Back to the noun declensions on the first page. Stems ending in alpha or eta. Someone rewrote this from last week. They did a pretty decent job, I guess. Stems ending in alpha and eta are the first declension. So that's noun stems ending in alpha or eta are in the first declension. And then on the second page, we have examples of hora, which means hour. That ends in alpha. And then graphe, which means writing or scripture, that ends in eta. So both those words are feminine and their first declension. Not all first declension nouns are feminine, but I believe the majority are. So to know it's feminine, you would memorize with graphe, whenever you memorize the vocabulary, hey, graphe, so you would know it takes feminine endings. And first declension here, where it takes feminine articles, and then it's first declension, so it takes first declension endings. And then second, or stems ending in omicron are in the second declension. So logos, which ends in omicron. You see, these are the nominative singular cases. And as you see in the first declension, it basically has no ending. ends with the word, or with the stem. In the second declension, ending in omicron, you've got the stem logo, which ends in an omicron, but then in the nominative, we add the sigma, so that's logos. And in the second declension, that's the masculine ending. You also have second declension neuter, which on the back page we have ergon, which means work. So here again, you've got the stem that ends in omicron, but in the neuter, the nominative ends in with a nu instead of a sigma. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you tonight, so feel free, ask me a question anytime you've got one. Back to gender, one thing I want to stress is that just because a word is a particular gender doesn't mean that it takes that gender. For example, may I pronounce that? Yeah, hamartia. That's a feminine noun. Do you know what it means? Yes, that equals sin. We also have hamartilos. Hamartilos, I keep forgetting. It's got the rough breathing. This is an omicron ending stem, so it's second declension, and it's also masculine. This is a alpha ending, and it's first declension feminine. This is sinner. So all sin is not female, and all sinners are not males, at least I hope. Although I'm sure some can make a case for it. So does that make sense? Just because a noun is particular gender does not mean that noun, that's the only type that noun can be. The gender affects the case endings that it uses for each case that it's in. So, questions?
On the first page, what was the last one?
Good question, because I didn't answer that one. The third declension ends in consonants, so it's consonantal stems. And we haven't discussed that yet. I'm sure Jeff will hit that at a later date. But consonantal stems, those can be third declension. Those can be masculine, feminine, or neuter. There's no as I said, most first declension are feminine and most second declension are masculine, but third declension is across the board, all three. Although there are some feminine or masculine first declension and I believe some feminine second declension, but there's not a lot.